I served in Vietnam with Mike Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Marine Division, from October 1968 to October 1969. I had just turned 18 when I arrived in country. Nothing really prepared me for what I saw. I returned to Vietnam in June of 1990. People asked me why I would want to go back to a place which seems so troubling for me. I told them I was going back to see if I had really been there the first time. When I returned back home in 1990, my old war wounds were open wide. I had reoccurring dreams. I sat myself down one morning and began to write. I had never written a poem in my life, but the words just came to me. And although the visions may disturb the reader, my nightmares have come to an end, and hopefully yours won't begin. Please remember those who lost their life in Vietnam, and try to be kind to those who've survived, those who can always use a little love. I'm going to read from my book, a book I wrote and I put together. It's a book of poems. I just always wanted to do this. It might help me to read them out loud. The name of the book is Confession. A poem of hope. The children no longer ask mother why dad screams in his sleep. They've grown, have children of their own, who I hope will never be frightened in the night by the screams of their dad fighting with the past, fighting for his life. Back before then, back before the frantic frenzy, the sun glorified, set softly. Dusk faded into twilight. The moon shared the sky with the stars. Tides crept upon pearl-white sand, rested, then slipped away as leaves turned and the geese flew south. Yes, my world once revolved on its own in peace, in time, when things were right, when everything was perfect. A Saturday night out. Let's go for a beer. I'm game if you are. My friend Jerome, a few years older than my 17, topped off the car's tank, and off we went. In the morning, I called my mother, collect from the Empire State Building. She said, get home now. But Ma, I'm in New York City now. Jerome and I got served, threw up, got lost in a subway, drank again, puked, and passed out. 12 hours late, I arrived home to find my clothes in brown paper bags just inside the front door. With nowhere to go 1 week later, I found myself standing at the position of attention on a yellow footprints on Paris Island, shivering, still hungover. 8 months later, my mother kissed me goodbye as I left for Vietnam. New as in shiny boots. Brother, do you think we'll get into a firefight today? What did you say? Just wondering if we might get into a firefight. Man, are you crazy? Huh? Do you understand what happens in the firefight? I think. Think shit, fool. I'll tell you what. Guys get killed, wasted, dead forever. Do you understand? Forever. The enemy base camp. A few days after Christmas, high in the mountains, beneath a mosaic of greens, triple canopy thick, we came upon bamboo huts with thatched roofs, up on stilts built along a beautiful mountain stream, fed by an underground spring. The ingenuity of those who had built such a camp held me in awe as my eyes followed the long lengths of bamboo split the long way, followed the flow of water within the carved-out bamboo aqueducts, which connected each hut with a constant supply of fresh running water. Pigs, 40 or more miles from their natural habitat, roamed loose through the mountain camp. How and who had herded the pigs so far and so high into the mountains seeped into our brains. The Kit Carson scout of North Vietnamese defector said we were in an enemy rest camp, large enough to sleep hundreds, and although the camp appeared empty, except for the pigs, he said most likely someone had been left behind. A search of the huts exposed no one, but what was discovered hanging inside most huts were handcrafted bird cages made from matchstick thin slices of bamboo, held together by short lengths of tough jungle vine, and yet there were no birds. Caves were discovered, some natural, some tunneled, and our tunnel rats went to work. Many caves had huge, oversized bamboo woven baskets filled to the brim with tons of uncooked rice. One cave had hundreds and hundreds of small cans, red in color with Chinese writing imprinted upon them. Inside the cans was the worst smelling fish ever smelt. Another cave was filled with 500 or more pairs of black pajamas and Ho Chi Minh sandals, and another with well-seasoned cauldrons and a few other metal pots. And the cave tunnel rat Dylan slithered into on his hand and knees had life inside it. When it was all over, after the sunset, as we sipped hot instant coffee from our canteen cups, Dylan said things moved fast, told how he heard water, a drip of water, more water, and then a sigh, or someone catching their breath. Then drops of water until the infrared tinted beam from his handheld light shined on 2 eyes, then 2 more, and the 4 eyes were mesmerized like animals in the dark, poached in the night. As it always seems, the world stopped, stared, then spun faster than ever, and as the eyes shined on a rifle, just out of reach, the slightest distance between life and death, Dylan's raised .45 exploded in fire, nearly shattering his eardrums. To us outside, being entertained by 2 monkeys swinging in the trees, the shots sounded like explosions coming from deep inside a West Virginia coal mine. Minutes later, with ropes tied around the dead ankles, Marines pulled 2 bodies out into the faint light of day. On a wood flat rock, a slab not too far from the stream, was the body of a girl with her midsection, intestines everywhere, blown wide apart, and a North Vietnamese colonel, possibly her lover, shot straight between the eyes. The pigs were corralled the next morning and murdered. Later in the day, from the safety of our own camp, we watched, while we ate and sipped coffee, our jets bomb what hell was left in the enemy base camp. Closed casket. Flash, boom, brown gray cloud. John! Lifted. Swallowed before my eyes like the mystical sleight of some sorcerer's hand. How? Foolish for me to yell out your name. No mouth, no face, no brain, no. heart, legs, arms gone beyond all help. Left behind in the morning heat, mute, angry Marines carried in a green rubber poncho, a spine wet to touch. I cried for you in the deaf world as we carried only an assumption. It had to be you, the only one missing. Wind and dust left with your remains in a silence which has never said goodbye. Out to dry. The first thing I ever shot looked no different than a black pajama top hung out to dry on my mother's clothesline, stretched between a huge half-dead oak and the rear porch where she would lift dripping wet laundry from a large aluminum colander, water seeping, and clothespin to wash to the line. Something like one of my father's red handkerchiefs, a bandana maybe, hung too. A split second after the trigger squeeze, like the wind blew and through the rifle sight and the bluish-gray tint of gunpowder smoke, there appeared 3 more in black, wavering in the breeze. I remember sparrows startled, scattered, just as if my mother had shooed them away. God forbid if they had soiled the wash. Then the line snapped and the black pajamas and red bandana dropped, disappeared into the ankle-deep weed. And I knew my mother would be madder than hell when she found her laundry on the ground, covered with blood. Funan 3. While Smith and I watched peasants work the flooded paddies below our hill, he took from his pack a family snapshot of his brothers and sisters. The picture struck me as being out of focus. The faces seemed masked, like they had nylon stocking tight over their face, like bank robbers in disguise, but yet their hair and clothing and the fur of a collie at their feet was a clear, sharp image. Off in the distance towards the west, a column of white phosphorus smoke filtered up through the green measured trees from Funan 3, a village often sympathetic towards the VC, especially at night. Overhead, a prop-driven spotter plane flew circles in lazy eights while it waited for the next flight of supersonic jets to swoop down upon the marked target. Meanwhile, atop of our hill, Smith told me as a child he and his brothers and sisters had been trapped inside their burning house. A real bad fire, he said. The silence, my loss of words, what could I say? As I handed back the picture, was broken by the scream of a fighter with its nose high, a steep spiral climb, an escape from the inferno, a deep red-orange ball of flame, an expanding glob of what I understood to be like gasoline thickened with airplane glue, a sticky mess, all on fire, known as napalm. And as the flames burnt out, thick clouds, smoke, billowed like an afternoon thunderhead on a hot summer day. Smith told me how they spent years in and out of hospitals, how they faced as a family hundreds of plastic surgeons. He said he breathed through a hole, indicated with his finger, ran it slightly over the scar, over his throat, but had an operation so he could breathe like others through their nose and mouth, so he could be a Marine, so he could join the fight. Again, silence. Broken by the next jet, a nosedive through heavy black smoke, another shiny aluminum canister, an end over end free fall, another ball of flame while up close. Smith points to his earlobes, lets me see how they end, in a point like icicles. Told me the fire was so hot his ears actually dripped. Another black cumulus cloud, more smoke from Funan 3, rises to the heavens as Smith grew silent after he told me his mother and father died in the fire trying to save their children. In irony, hours later, Smith would lose his life in a cloud of smoke at Funan 3. Night ambush. Revenge came in the faint glow of stars, a fingernail slither of moon, and the man-made light of distant flares slowly burning out. Down low in damp weed, tall enough to hide an elephant, 4 tired, worn, and hungry Marines hid alongside the muddy village trail, waited for the enemy, who more than likely would not show. There was this ungodly stench of buffalo dung, each other's sweat, rotted cartridge belts mixed with the chemical smell of mosquito repellent smeared on the back of their hands, their wrist, face, neck, and ears tuned to the sounds of the night, sounds of mosquitoes in flight, biding their time as they waited for the invisible barrier to dissipate, and squeaky like worn fan belts sounding crickets, rivets from a bullfrog deep down inside a nearby well, the rumble of artillery harassing the enemy in the next valley over, and the loudest sound of all, their own hearts. Catman, the team leader, sniffed away at a letter, 10 days old, one of those I miss you letters from his girl back home, penned on paper once saturated with inexpensive teenage perfume, as if the aroma, if in fact was still there, was some strange, exotic drug. Dew like perspiration formed on their black plastic rifle stocks, glistened as if the night sky was afloat on top of the protective film of gun oil, wiped upon the metal parts of their weapons to prevent rust. Weapons cradled in their arms like newborn children. Then the end began. Shooting stars, 2 of them crisscrossed the sky high overhead, and before a wish could be made, one pale white cheek appeared to float, what seemed to be about waist high compared to a tall Marine. A cheek coming down the trail, a pale white cheek, betrayed by the moon and the death of the 2 falling stars. Then as a flare off in the distance burst into life, there appeared not 1 or 2, but 3 silhouettes, conical-shaped heads, perfect targets. And as the flare burnt itself out, like we hear the sun will one day, the 3, clad in black, caught in the open, were never to know what hit. Catman's love letter falls, his finger to his lips. Shh. Weapons in slow motion shouldered. He parts the weeds so slightly like a nervous actor peeks through the break in the curtain before the show begins. With his index finger raised, in their heads the Marines hear 1, then the bullfrog croaks. Index and middle finger, 2, and the mosquitoes dare land. And just before 3, just before the squeeze of the trigger, a sound like mud, like potter's clay, oozed between the toes of the enemy. And then surprise, a flashing quick snap, flash, crackle, crack, crackle, like the crackle of 1 pack of fireworks exploding in the night to celebrate the 4th. And then done. And in the pitch, the black, which followed, the 3 lay dead in nature's silence and puddles of blood, dark as crankcase oil, floating on top of the mud. Left behind, we came upon a young girl lying on a woven bamboo mat in this bone-dried ditch, naked from the waist down, except for a swarm of flies and gnats which left us with the image of staring through a screen door at her blood-stained legs, knees bent, drawn into her stomach. Glenn, our point man, quick like snap from his hip, his 16, aimed, but did not shoot. Then came to drop on one knee at the sight of her long black hair and all the blood, and called for Doc, who broke from the column, ran up the trail, and two knelt beside her. As the patrol slowed to a halt, as I came abreast of this scene, I noticed what I was told later to be the afterbirth at her feet. Yet she was alone. Had the sight of us Marines scared her family away? And where was the child? We'd never know, for no one amongst us spoke her language or could read her eyes. And even if we could, barrel-assing up the trail was a sergeant who demanded to know what the hell the holdup was. Damn, look for yourself, Doc said, and began to plead her case, along with Glenn and a few others who only wanted to help, wanted to see her taken to safety. Yet it was the sergeant's bellow we bowed to and not our hearts and minds. I see no baby. Leave her. Move the hell out. This is plain and simple. A trick. A goddamn ambush. And we left her behind. The moratorium. In protest of the war, everyone driving a vehicle on the day of the moratorium drove with headlights on in the bright light of day. Yes, it seemed like everyone. I rode around town with my old high school pals, drank beer in the back seat. Half smashed, I told about a village we burnt after John from Wisconsin was blown to smithereens. Not cool, they said. Not the part about John tripping a booby trap, but the burning of a village. Stopped at a red light, I opened the car door, stumbled out, and walked away on my own. My pals drove around the block, then came back, flashing the headlights from high to low, to high to low. Blew the horn, made a ruckus, and threw me the finger. Before midnight, when I came home from the war, the high school girls wanted no more than burgers, fries, and a Coke from McDonald's, or wanted just to hold hands and be friends. Always needed to be home before midnight. Me, I wanted to be in Bangkok once more. A consequence of war. Sometimes I just can't figure how 1 year, or 365 days, or 8,760 hours, or 525,000 minutes, or 31,536,000 seconds, or the memory of one dead friend in Vietnam can screw up the other 97.5% of my life, sending me into a rage when I open the refrigerator door and discover the milk has been pushed to the rear, blocked by the iced tea. Survivor's guilt. My neighbor told me he went to the wall, said he should have gone, could have gone, wanted to go, had orders, but I went. Should have died, could have died, almost died, but. John Wayne, not back there, back in the jungle in the thick of battle when I drew a bead upon your silhouette, centered dead in my sights. But now, Years later, as I walk with my dog through the forest, autumn-colored, peaceful and quiet, I wonder, had you ever heard of John Wayne? And who did you want to be when you, or if you had grown up? The moment I squeezed the trigger and your silhouette dropped from sight, I haven't forgotten you, haven't known who I am, not since I became John Wayne. Confession. You come to confess your sins? Yes, Father. I shot and killed a man. Yes, go on. I killed him. When? During the war. This man, he was a soldier? Yes, Father. An enemy soldier? Yes, Father. And you were a soldier? Yes, Father. In battle. Well, son, those things happen. Do you have other sins for the Lord? No, Father. No? No, Father. How are you with yourself? What, Father? How are you? Do you touch? Masturbate? Yes. Then let us bow our heads and pray for forgiveness.